is going to be displayed in its full glory in the centre of this court. So we'll get that done, and I think there are one or two other props as well. So let's get that all in place, and once that's done, we'll then resume with the evidence. My anticipation is that we'll do as best we can up until about 1:30ish, so that we get the bulk, if we can, of his evidence out, and then we can resume after perhaps a shorter lunchtime to hear his evidence concluded today. There is, after that, Mr. Ramadar, you weren't here when I was giving my judgment earlier on. I'm content for you to read the very short statement of Elia Henry, who is the daughter, the 11-year-old daughter. Please, at the conclusion of today, read that statement. I've said that I don't think that Tia Mary Gopal adds anything to what we already have, my having admitted Mr. Yusuf Henry's mother and sister's evidence in addition. So I think that whilst the statement has been served and it serves as part of the material in the case, it's unnecessary to read it aloud, but I am going to permit the 11-year-old daughter statement to be read by you, as I understand it. Is that right?
I'm grateful to you.
Right. Well, we'll do that at the end of today as well. All right. So the programme then is we'll rise for 5 minutes or 10 whilst this is being done. We'll then have the evidence of the witness. That will continue till about 1:30ish. We'll resume after a shorter lunch break, and then we'll have the final parts of the evidence concluded today. So one way or the other, all of the evidence concluded today, whatever time that is. Thank you very much. Let's rise for a few minutes.
All right.
So the next witness is
Mr.
Khan.
Zaid Khan. Mr. Zaid Khan.
From INCORTEC.
He is an expert.
Now.
We don't intend to challenge.
His statement, and there are some additions. Yes, please come in, Mr. Khan. His statement and the additions are in
the supplemental co-bundle.
1389.
1389.
Yes. And then at the back there are 3 letters.
1533
and following.
and 1536A and 1536C.
Got them all. Lovely. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Khan. Can you take the oath, please?
I, please state your name,
Zaid Khan,
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that the evidence
that the evidence
I shall give
to
this commission
in this case
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, do take a seat. Mr. Khan, I know you've been waiting, and I'm grateful for your doing so. We have your full report, some revisions to it, and a number of other documents in relation to that, which is going to be asked of you. Now, who's going to do the... Right, now, Mr. Bissessar, who sits opposite you, is going to, in part, I think, summarise and in part refer to relevant parts of your evidence, and that will serve as your evidence in chief, all right, so that everybody understands who you are and what we're doing. After that, then, Mr. Maharaj, who sits with the little table in front of him, is going to be asking you some questions, and then a number of the barristers and lawyers here will also have an opportunity to ask you questions, all right? Now, that's the process. We're going to go on till about 1:30 or so that we get a good chunk of your evidence dealt with first before we take our break for a bit of a lunch and adjournment, all right? But one way or the other, we will conclude your evidence today. And so, with no more ado, I'll ask Mr. Bissessar to do his thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Zaid Khan is an expert. He is the President and CEO of INCORTEC Limited, which is a company carrying out inspection, metallurgical design and quality control engineering services at 15 to 17 Rodriguez Street, Victoria Village, San Fernando. Mr. Khan is a registered professional engineer and failure analysis consultant. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering and a Diploma in Microstructural Analysis, and is certified as, firstly, an ASNT NDT Level 3, secondly, as an API 510 and 570 Certified Inspector, and thirdly, as an AWS Certified Welding Inspector. Mr. Khan is also a licensed, competent person for hoists, boilers, and pressure vessels under the Occupational Safety and Health Authority. INCORTEC Limited was retained by OSHA to conduct a relevant root cause failure analysis and causative factors in relation to the accident which occurred on 25th February 2022. The company was also requested to review PARIA's scope of works and the methodology adopted by the LMCS. I will now read selective excerpts from the report, starting with the executive summary at 2.0. I will then read the report's findings and discussions at 3.0, and I will conclude with the recommendations at 5.0. I will then relate the supplementals to the report. Good. So I'm starting with the executive summary, Chairman. It's at 1394, and it reads as follows. The root cause of this accident was the failure by both the client, PARIA Fuel Trading Company Limited, PARIA, and the contractor, LMCS Limited, LMCS, to recognize that a latent hazardous differential pressure condition, delta P, would have been created by the methodology used in the execution of the works, with particular reference to the removal of fuel oil from sea line SL36. If this delta P hazard was recognized, then simple mitigation steps and or changes in methodology could have been instituted to eliminate this hazard. LMCS's Method Statement 116, Attachment X, pertaining to installation of the SO flange on riser at number 6 berth, was based on partial removal of the line content using an air-driven pump as per their method statement submitted with their proposal, see Attachment 8. This procedure was changed to air blowing, and the management of change was not adequately addressed with respect to appropriate and timely issuance of JSA and method statement. The reasons for this change were not recorded in any subsequent analysis or discussion from the data supplied to OSHA from PARIA and LMCS. The removal of fuel oil from line and the installation of a migration barrier, as stipulated in PARIA's Scope of Works, Section 2.1 and 3.1.12, respectively, created a large gaseous void in sea line SL36. This void served as a prerequisite for the latent differential pressure hazard that was created when the habitat was installed and pressurized to facilitate work within the said habitat. The hazards associated with this void were overlooked by both PARIA and LMCS. See drawing SK1 in attachment for an illustration for this gaseous void. LMCS Job Safety Analysis, PARIA's Permit to Work number 9320, LMCS's Method Statement, Risk Assessment, LMCS's Toolbox Meeting, LMCS's Dive Plan, and PARIA's Bid Evaluation of LMCS's proposal all failed to identify this potential differential pressure delta P hazard, and hence no steps to eliminate the hazard were implemented. This latent hazard existed at the onset of work within the habitat and became active when the divers were attempting to remove the primary seal, which is the inflatable plug, from within the riser. See drawing SK1 in attachment and section 3.1 for further details. Not being aware of this latent differential pressure condition incorporating a gaseous void, LMCS's divers proceeded to deflate the plug after safe removal of the mechanical seal. On reaching a deflated pressure of approximately 11.4 psig, the resistive force of the plug was then lower than the downward force, 4,031 pounds force on the plug. This force of 4,031 thrust the plug down the oily riser into the large gaseous void, previously created by removal of the line contents. See also 2.2 above. Simultaneously, the transient and sudden loss of habitat pressure caused the seawater to rush up into the habitat, pouring into the 30-inch diameter riser at a rate of 540 gallons per second at a velocity of 14 feet per second, creating a free vortex, entraining all personnel and loose equipment into the riser. Gravity, habitat supply air from the compressor, large gaseous void, and an endless supply of water perpetuated this vortex in the riser. A diagrammatic illustration of sequence of events and section 3.1 for further details. A scale model at Incortech Limited fully demonstrated this scenario. Appropriate JSA risk assessments were not seen for several key activities in LMCS's proposal supplied to OSHA from PARIA with respect to safety issues. This reflected the lack of thoroughness of the bid evaluation by PARIA. PARIA had stipulated in their scope of work that method statements and JSAs be supplied for all key elements of the projects. See section 3.2. LMCS's method statement 116, attachment X, items 56 and 57, pertaining to removal of migration barrier and inflatable plug, could only have been applied safely if a delta P condition was not present. This was also a grave oversight by both PARIA and LMCS during this evaluation, and subsequent discussions with LMCS. As stated before, the method and extent of line content removal resulted in a large gaseous void within the 30-inch diameter C line SL36. See drawing SK1 in attachment. In the 6 psig pressurized habitat, a downward force of 4,031 pounds force on the face of the inflatable plug was counteracted by a resistive force of 5,292 pounds exerted by the 48-inch long inflatable plug of the wall of the riser, based on a plug inflation pressure of 15 psig. This provided the necessary seal during all hot works within the habitat. The sequence of events leading up to this accident are described verbally and illustrated via appropriate drawings, as shown in sketches SK1 to SK6 in the attachments. The operational safety concerns observed during inspection of the crane, example load slippage under engine cut-off, non-functional load cell, etc., did not contribute to this accident. Inspection of the compressors, hoses, air filter pots, scuba gear did not reveal any issues that could have been contributory to this accident. Test and inspection of the inflatable plug confirmed that there were no issues with the plug that contributed to the accident. It is to be noted that the inflatable plug was intact and operational upon removal of the mechanical seal, as it was then exposed to the habitat pressure of 6 psig, equivalent to a downward force of 4,031 pounds on the said plug. Supply air problems, example compressor failure, were not experienced as corroborated by discussions held with OSHA and barge topside personnel. It is to be noted that supply air from the compressor into the habitat accelerated the vortex formation and strengthened its force and suction. The hyperbaric chamber, also referred to as the habitat, and the mechanical plug were not inspected as they were not recovered from the seabed at the time of this report. Possible malfunction of the habitat or air compressor was not considered to be contributory to this accident, as the operation of the habitat and the compressor remained intact during and after the accident, facilitating the recovery of one diver within the said pressurized habitat. On his return up the riser, the lone survivor stated that he was approximately 5 feet from the top of the riser and within the habitat, confirming that the compressor was in operation and supplying air to the habitat. This confirms that when the flow into the riser was stabilized, air supplied by the compressor forced the water back down in the habitat again, creating a dry, workable environment. I will now read out the findings and discussions. This is at 1396. Firstly, removal of line contents. The removal of contents with respect to quantity and method in line SL36 between number 5 and 6 berths was the underlying factor that led to this accident. This removal created a gaseous void in the riser and sea line, setting up a latent differential pressure condition between the habitat and a large gaseous void in the sea line when the mechanical seal and inflatable plug were installed and the habitat pressurized. See drawing SK1 in attachment. With reference to fuel oil removal from sea line 36, LMCS's method statement under section A, procedure for removal of line content between berths 5 and berth 6, cited 2 areas. A, using air-driven pump out approximately 300 barrels of line content. B, once level in the riser dropped to 35 feet below sea level, a line plug will be installed. Reference page 6 of 22 of LMCS's method statement. A and B are contradictory, as removal of line contents to 35 feet below sea level in the riser would have been equivalent to approximately 30 barrels of oil removal with no gaseous void formation on installation of the mechanical seal and inflatable plug. On the other hand, as stated by LMCS, A, pumping out 300 barrels with an air pump does not equate to dropping level in the riser to 35 feet below sea level. This discrepancy was not addressed in PARIA's bid evaluation. Further, LMCS's project schedule calls for draining of line from day one of job execution, further adding conjecture to this exercise. PARIA's maintenance department, as recorded by OSHA, stated that line contents were indeed removed by air blowing from number 5 berth to number 6 berth. This technique, although not stated in LMCS's method statement or in PARIA's SOW, would have created scope of works, would have definitely removed way in excess of the optimum quantity of oil from the line, thus creating a significant continuous gaseous void between berths 5 and 6 together with empty risers. This condition would have introduced a very dangerous latent differential pressure condition as soon as the inflatable plug and mechanical seal were installed in the line and the habitat placed and pressurized. This latent hazardous condition existed very early in the job execution, but was activated on the 25th of February 2022 when 5 divers were in the process of deflating the riser plug for its removal. See drawing SK3 in attachment for a pictorial illustration. See drawing SK1 and SK4 in attachment. And he concludes, changing the method of oil removal from the line from using an air-driven pump, as per LMCS's method statement, to forced air blowing from berth 5 resulted in a dramatic increase in the risk profile of the job. I turn to the recommendations as made at page 1403 at 5.0. At 5.1, working in differential pressure environments necessitate an engineering risk analysis by a competent person. Differential pressure can be assumed to exist when 1. Water levels vary between adjoining areas. 2. Water is next to a gaseous void. 3. HP air is next to low pressure air. 4. Positive pressure, that is, above atmospheric, is next to atmospheric pressure, 0 psig. The differential pressure condition in this accident was not active but latent. The condition became active when the plug or the barrier was being deflated by the divers. The divers were most likely unaware that a large gaseous void existed behind the inflatable plug due to excess line contents removal, and as such, the lack of knowledge and communication on this issue could have contributed to this accident. 5.2. All risk factors must be considered whilst working in a positive pressure environment similar to a habitat. Where possible, actions must be taken to avoid these risks. Example, some of these risks are as follows. 1. Loss of positive pressure. 2. Possibility of establishing flow conditions from area of high pressures to areas of low pressures. 3. Faulty operation of seals. 4. Improper installation and retrieval of seals. 5. Creation of large gaseous voids on the low pressure side of seals or plugs in a differential pressure condition. 5.3. Differential pressure problems can be adequately minimized by the following. 1. Back pressure or equalizing the pressure on both sides of the seal. 2. Maintaining a physical barrier. 3. Avoidance of creating flow conditions, be it liquid, vapor, or air. 4. Avoidance of creating empty spaces or gaseous voids on the low pressure side of seals. 5.4. In high-risk jobs, always ensure that JSAs are not generic. A JSA must address a particular task with in-depth analysis of potential hazards and necessary mitigation steps to be adopted. Work permits must also reference the applicable JSA or JSAs. 5.5. All changes to original procedures, as we experienced on this high-risk job, should be carefully managed and appropriate JSAs developed. Having executed a robust management of change, MOC procedure is essential. 5.6. Have real-time video and audio contact. 5.7. In risk assessment forms pertaining to diving work operations, a section should be included titled Differential Pressure Conditions and Hazards. 5.8. Suitable qualified and equipped rescue personnel should be at hand at all times. 5.9. Inspect and certify the habitat before use. Name tag with maximum internal pressure limits should be installed. 5.10. Inspect and certify all seals before use. 5.11. Cleaning all mating surfaces between the seal and substrate, be it a pipe, nozzle, or vessel. 5.12. Pressurization of seals are to be done in accordance with the OEM specifications. I turn to the 3 letters that were written after the report. The first is at the 6th of December 2022, which is at Supplemental Core Bundle 1533. It's a letter dated 6 December 2022 from the expert to the Secretary. Dear Ms. Sinanan, in response to your request dated 30th November 2022 for further advice, I wish to advise as follows on the 5 matters. 1. The carber test specifically verifies the structural integrity as well as the leak tightness of the weld and adjacent parent material. Failure to conduct the carber test had no bearing or influence on the existent latent delta P within the pipeline, nor would it have contributed to any induced delta P. 2. As a latent delta P condition did indeed exist within the system based on PARIA's evidence, then PARIA was duty-bound to mitigate the risk and highlight it to all and sundry. In fact, PARIA's own HSE safety guidelines, which includes, and he quotes, hierarchy of risk control, clearly specifies elimination as the most effective method of risk mitigation. 3. On removal of the mechanical seal by LMCS's personnel, as seen on video footage, the inflatable plug was subjected to the habitat pressure of 6 psig, equivalent to a downward axial force of 4,031 pounds, and it held its seal for an extended period. In no way did the alleged out-of-roundness affect the inflatable plug grip on the pipe ID, and thus there was no need for a pressure test. As stated in Cortex Limited's report, and he specifies, on reaching a deflated pressure of approximately 11.4 psig, the resistive force of the plug was lower than the downward force 4,031 pounds on the plug. Thrust the plug down the oily riser into the large gaseous void. Furthermore, the alleged out-of-roundness of the pipe had little or no effect on the inflatable plug's sealing ability. The plug material, flexibility, and design would have catered for differences in pipe ovality. It is the opinion of the undersigned that the out-of-roundness, if any, was negligible, as there were no problems reported during fit-up of the new slip-on flange on the said riser. And then 4 and 5. Prior to Mr. Christopher Boudram's rescue, the entire system stabilized and equalized itself at both ends of SL36, and thus allowed Mr. Boudram to negotiate the pipe without any disruptions, as the system was static. This condition was the best opportunity to attempt a rescue, as removing the blank at berth 5 or shutting down the compressor would have released the stored potential energy from the compressed air and thus disturb the equilibrium and thereby imperil any divers in air pockets. Mr. Khan then says, if you require further information or clarification, please do not hesitate to contact the undersigned. And he concludes, sourcing the entire video footage obtained from the crawler boroscope from berth 5, conducted around 5 a.m. on Saturday, 26 February, may be worthwhile for this investigation. Mr. Chairman, there was a further letter dated 28th December 2022, which is at page 1536A, and I will just read the contents, again addressed to Ms. Sinanan. Dear Ms. Sinanan, in light of the several references made by various legal counsel to the above report, I wish to bring to the attention of the Commission the following pointers. These, in my opinion, will negate the possibilities of misinformed deductions, skewed inferences, and unnecessary conjecture in further deliberations. 1. An agreement dated March 2022 was signed between Incortec Limited and OSHA to conduct a root cause analysis and causative factor investigation pertaining to the tragic incident. 2. To satisfy the requirements of the said agreement, the following was adopted as stated in my report under Section 1.6. A. Inspection of associated equipment used Firstly, positive pressure habitat hyperbaric chamber. Secondly, compressors. Thirdly, hoses. Fourth, filter pots. Fifth, inflatable pipe plug. 6, mechanical seal. 7, scuba equipment. 8, crane used in the exercise, being a model LS218H. B, review of PARIA's scope of works. C, review of contractor LMCS's method statements, job safety analysis and risk assessment. D, review of relevant work permits, risk analysis, dive plan and schedule notes. And he notes that the habitat was not seen. In his further opinion, he says, 3, during the investigation, prior to the issuance of the report, other information deemed relevant and necessary, example, details surrounding the actual line content removal and methodology, were not received. 4, owing to the delays experienced, the scheduled time for the submission of the report was not met. 5, the report was issued to OSHA on 19th July 2022, several weeks late, with the caveat, this report is based on the information and available documents supplied by OSHA, as stated under paragraph 1.7, page 6 of my report. And then at 6, based on reviews of additional pertinent information seen after the issuance of my report, I wish to state that my basic conclusions and recommendations remain. 7, based on pertinent information supplied to me on 27th July 2022 by OSHA, which I requested on 6 May 2022, there may be need to revise some sketches in my report to reflect a more realistic picture. And then it says, in summary, 1, agreement between OSHA and Incotec Limited was signed on 29th March 2022. 2, report issued to OSHA on 19th July 2022. 3, pertinent additional information requested by myself during discussions with OSHA was supplied on 27th July 2022, 7 days after issuance of the report. And it says any further clarification can be accommodated through contact with the undersigned. His third letter, dated 6 January 2023, is at Supplemental Core Bundle 1536C. Again to Ms. Sinanan.
1356.
Sorry, 1356C. Dear Ms. Sinanan, in response to your request, I wish to reply as follows. A, in view of the many variables in a project of this nature, and in consideration of the nature of the accident, I thought it would have been prudent to build a model to demonstrate several scenarios pertaining to this accident. This decision was made whilst conducting the root cause analysis as requested by OSHA through an agreement between Incotec Limited and themselves. This was not part of my remit from my agreement with OSHA. However, in the interest of education and understanding for all parties involved, I proceeded to build this model at my expense. Subsequent availability of information pertaining to this exercise of repairs to Sea Line 36 at berth 6, PARIA confirmed in my mind that I had the correct inclination to construct this model. The parameters considered were to simulate as close as possible the various aspects of the job leading up to and inclusive of the accident. Parameters included sea levels, riser positions, subsea line, air supply, and flange and habitat installation. The components of this model were made of transparent material for ease of understanding and to afford some reality to what actually happened. Owing to its many variables, a fixed scale ratio was impossible. However, the main objective was to demonstrate the physics and hydraulics involved for a better understanding and indelible visual impact on the minds of all. The basic principles of flow dynamics, pressure differentials, gravity, and compression were considered, as these very principles were common to the execution of this job. There were no major differences in the fundamental engineering principles of both the model and actual site equipment and condition, apart from scale size and materials of construction. I hope that the above sheds some light on your request. He then prepared a table, and I will just narrate as best as I can what the table demonstrates. The heading is oil quantities removed from Sea Line 36 and topside piping due to Phase 1 and Phase 2 air blowing. Phase 1, 18th January 2022, 798 barrels removed. On 20th January 2022, unknown quantity of barrels removed. On 21st January 2022, 118 barrels removed. Total phase 1, at least 916 barrels. And then on 1st February 2022, there was a setup for phase 2. And phase 2, which was subsea, on 2nd February 2022, 276 barrels were removed. On 3rd February 2022, 60 barrels were removed, which were in a barge. He said not 100. On 4th February 2022, an unknown quantity of barrels were removed, so that the total for phase 2 was at least 336 barrels. He says the total of phase 1 and phase 2 is at least 1,252 barrels. The author makes 2 notes. Note number 1, out of the 960 barrels removed during phase 1, it is estimated that approximately 200 barrels was drained from the topside piping leading to sea line 66. So therefore, 716 barrels was displaced from SL36 risers and horizontal section. I estimated the topside piping to have contained approximately 200 barrels of line contents based on my recollection of its configuration. The conclusions in my investigative report issued to OSHA in July 2022 will remain unchanged, even though the estimated amount of 200 barrels from the topside piping is not exact. And his second note, phase 2 removal consisted of at least 336 barrels subsea only. Mr. Chairman, what is now contemplated is that we will now show the video which was prepared and presented by Mr. Khan. The video is in 4 parts, and each part will be paused from time to time for Mr. Khan to give various explanations in respect of what is shown. Afterwards, the video will be shown again, this time uninterrupted. Thereafter, it is anticipated that Mr. Miraj may ask several questions of the expert.
Lovely, thank you very much. We'll let that happen. Is it proposed that Mr. Carden should, as it were, point to things that help us as we go along?
Yes.
I wonder in that case if we can move that screen around a little bit so that everyone can see what he's pointing at. And then I think there's a microphone as well that he can have to assist us. But someone needs to turn that screen a few degrees to the to the right. My right, its left. Yeah, just could you just very slightly back again? No, that's too much. That's it. Perfect. Great. Thank you.
If I may first mention what the first video is.
Yes, please.
Mr. Khan, the first video gives a site description, an introduction to the model, and phase 1 air blowing. And this is how the first video is labeled by Mr. Khan. So what will happen, I will allow the operator to start the video, and then I would stop it at 44 seconds and give you, Mr. Khan, an opportunity to explain it. Okay?
Okay. This picture shows an overview of berth 6 offshore, where the incident occurred. Depth in this area is approximately 60 feet, with riser pipes coming up from the sea bed. Here we see the actual configuration of the top side of the 30-inch diameter sea line number 36, into which the golfers were engulfed. We see the top bolted flange of the riser mating with a long radius elbow through which the product is pumped. The flange at the top of the riser is approximately 5 feet above sea water. This long radius elbow was removed.
Right. Mr. Khan, could you point out the top of riser at berth 6 for us, please?
Take that from on the side.
Yeah.
The top of the riser. The top of the riser is in this area here. Okay? And that's the elbow that was removed to facilitate viewing and facilitate work on this flange as they look down into the pipe.
Okay. Now, if you stay there, if you don't mind.
Pardon me?
If you can remain right there, if you do not mind.
Okay, yeah.
I'll ask to play the video and stop at 1 minute.
Move to facilitate maintenance work on the said sea line. Here we see an overview of the model used to demonstrate the various work activities associated with the repairs and preparation of the line to facilitate such repairs.
Okay. Now, this is a tabletop model which you have prepared, but the model is not to scale. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Right. Can I ask you to point out and explain what you're seeing here from the right of the screen to the left? I can assist you. Boat 5, from the right to the screen to the left.
This is boat 5 here.
Okay, then it's the 38-inch feet long pipe.
Pardon me, repeat that.
The 30-inch
100.
1,200 foot.
Yes, the
Well,
30-inch 1,200
that's-
feet long pipe.
That's the number 5 berth riser there, and this represents the entire length
Of the pipe.
the subsea line.
Yes.
And you will see here, I just put some liquid in it to represent the initial condition of that line, that it was filled with liquid or filled with fuel oil, as said by PARIA.
Okay, and the stovepipe.
The stovepipe, this represents, as you already realize, this entire thing represents the ocean. And this is the stovepipe on top the habitat, where materials can be introduced into this or taken out. This is a small aquarium pump here, used to supply air to the habitat. And this represents a barge here, where LMCS barge, was floating on the water next to the berth 6 riser.
And what about the compressor?
The compressor was this aquarium pump.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
that represents the rail compressor on side, but
Right.
the aquarium pump to supply air for the model.
And the tank.
This tank here is a 50-gallon tank that was used to demonstrate the ocean at this particular area. This is number 6 berth riser coming up here. And this represents the gooseneck, as you saw in the previous pictures.
Right.
And this line represents a line going to offshore. This is a mistake here, but this is supposed to be offshore instead of, supposed to be onshore instead of offshore. Offshore means it's out in the sea, onshore means on land. So this just shows the demonstration where the system on the oil has been pumped through sea line 66 onto land to be stored in a tank.
Right.
What represents the habitat, or is it not there yet?
The habitat?
Yes.
This is the habitat here, this plastic bottle here.
Right.
That's a plastic bottle that represents the habitat,
But
and that's on top of the habitat is the stovepipe.
Right.
But would it be correct to say that the image on the model reflects the position before the habitat was installed?
Yes, that's correct. The image on the model here represents the habitat is waiting to be installed here, but you had to drain the line first
Right.
before we install the habitat.
Right. We got you. We'll now play the video and stop at 3.55 minutes.
We see berth number 5 on the right-hand side, berth number 6 on the left-hand side.
Okay. Sorry. Go. Play it on the 3.55.
A distance of approximately 1,200 feet between them.
You play it on
The subsea line filled with fuel oil is seen, terminated with risers at both 6 and both 5.
You reach here?
We also see the model habitat with a compressor on a floating barge. A 50-gallon tank container is also seen, filled with water to simulate the actual ocean, and a riser at number 6 berth, into which the divers were engulfed. We see also a manometer on the side of the tank used to measure the pressure inside the habitat when installed. This tabletop model represents part of the ocean with depths varying from 50 feet to 60 feet at berth 6. Here we see the offshore tank into which product from the sea line 36 was pumped to facilitate clearing of the said line. This manometer represents the pressure gauge used for monitoring the pressure within the habitat where the divers would execute their work. We also see a 5-inch diameter plastic bottle with a PVC pipe at the top to represent the habitat, and stovepipe through which tools and materials can be fed and suspended. We also see an aquarium pump used to represent the compressor for supplying air to the habitat. The 1,200-foot long line filled with fuel can be seen with the levels at berth 5 and berth 6. So what we have here is a huge manometer between berth 5 and berth 6. This product in the line, as shown with the pointer, has to be removed to facilitate repairs. The 1,200 long line is actually straight, but is shown looped here for clarity. We also see the compressor hooked up at the top of berth 5 to facilitate the air required for pushing the product out. A line was pulled between berth 5 and berth 6 to show the levels in the risers. We also see an aquarium pump at the top there on berth 5 to supply the air to facilitate the air blowing as per PARIA's work instruction.
Right. Sorry. Is this the document, the work instructions, which is attached to PARIA work instruction at CB3, Core Bundle 3, page 1039?
Yes, it is.
Secretary. I'm showing him the hard copy too.
Well, I don't see the drawing here.
1039. Then I ask you this. Maybe I could ask him on the diagram.
Okay.
On the right. Okay. Can you explain to us what it shows?
Or this line diagram represents the relative positions of number 5 berth here and number 6 berth here. And this is number 36 sea line progressing from number 5 berth, coming all the way subsea up on number 6 berth, going through a gooseneck onto a manifold on 6 berth. And that manifold is valved so that oil can go this way through a header, a large header on top here, down to this valve onto sea line 66 before going to shore. This sea line 66 is I don't know how long it is, but it's a 50-inch diameter line. I think it's about 2 miles long, they say. But that's what this represents. To give you a pictorial view of the system as it was designed.
So on the right it shows berth 5, and it is from there where the air blowing to clear the line was introduced, correct?
Correct. The air was introduced via a compressor through this valve here.
Yes.
So that, and this line, this here was slip blanked. A blank was put here, and the valve was closed. So any pressurized air coming in here will tend to push everything this way, up this way, through the manifold, and down to true line 66 to onshore.
Great. So it shows, then it goes down, and then horizontally, and then vertically to berth 6, and then into C line.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Correct. And after that into the shore tank, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, sir.
Then we will play the next part of the video up to 4.44.
This line diagram shows the piping configuration from berth 5 to berth 6 to facilitate air blowing using a compressor at berth 5 to displace the subsea line contents to the offshore tank 111 as shown in the line diagram, drawing 1. Compressed air was used from the compressor at berth 5 to displace the fuel oil from the line. We see the fuel oil being pushed forward along the line, subsea line, into the riser at berth 6, through the gooseneck, and on to through line 66 onto the offshore tankage.
And would this be the demonstration of the air blowing during phase 1? Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct on that.
And again, it shows that the air was introduced at berth 5, pushed the line content through the horizontal section of the pipeline to berth 6, and then through C line 66 to the onshore tank.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. The onshore tank, Mr. Khan, is where the measurements of the oil drain would have been taken. Am I correct?
Yeah, this is as recorded in the PARIA's method statement.
Yes.
Or PARIA, one of the method statements associated with this job, with this phase of the job.
Is it in the daily reports or the method statement?
I think it's in the daily report, you know.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Daily report that was supplied by PARIA.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's play the video and we'll stop it at 4.59.
A point will be reached where more air than fuel was seen coming from the control valves at berth 6 and onshore, where flow was monitored and measured.
Right. Could you explain what we are seeing here?
What is happening here, as I said, a point will be reached where a lot of the stuff will be expunged from the C line 36. But there will be a particular time where the quantity of oil that was removed is such that air will be traversing to here and bubbling up through that vertical riser. Right? The air is much lighter and it will, with respect to the liquid. And the liquid, due to gravity, will just keep coming down. Okay? And the air will be just bubbling through here. So it will give an indication that a lot of line content was removed at that particular point. And then, because this was being monitored somewhere, I think it was on the manifold system on berth 6 by operations department. Or it was, when they see this air coming on that, they would have, say, hey, a lot of liquid has been expunged from the line, and there's still more liquid in the line, so we'll have to do something else to get the liquid out. But I think the objective was to drain the line as much as possible.
So, in effect, what you're saying that a point would have reached where more air than fuel would have been seen coming from the control valves at berth 6 and onshore where the flow was being monitored and measured.
Yes, yes, yes. At berth 6 there is a bleed there, or a vent as the case may be, and they would have probably opened that to do a verification check on the extent of the blow-in with respect to line content removal.
Good.
You know, that is the way that they could gauge visibly on the berth 6, at least to see, have an idea what's happening with respect to line removal. Whilst on shore, I don't know what measuring technique they had, but they would also measure that technique on there. And I think in the LMCS method statement, it was stated that they will be monitoring this process by this technique here. They look at, see what's happening here with respect to the air, how much air is coming out, and also PARIA's operation personnel will be monitoring the volume of barrels expunged from this particular exercise. That's how I understood it.
Good. Now, the second video, before I start, the second video demonstrates phase 2 air blowing, and this is how Mr. Khan has labeled the second video.
I wonder if before we go to the second one, could we watch the first one again from start to finish?
Okay, could we
Perhaps
watch
we'll take a seat for a moment. And we just, I mean, you're giving us commentary on the video anyway, but I'd like to see it from start to finish, please.
This picture shows an overview of berth 6 offshore, where the incident occurred. Depth in this area is approximately 60 feet, with riser pipes coming up from the sea bed. Here we see the actual configuration of the top side of the 30-inch diameter sea line number 36, into which the golfers were engulfed.
Can we stop there?
Stop.
We see the top bolted flange.
Stop for a moment, please.
I just want to clarify this point here. This particular picture was taken way before the time of the accident and way before the contract was awarded, because this picture here represents the gooseneck on the line. So this picture, I did not say that in my voice recording, that this section here, this picture was taken way before. So this has to be understood.
Okay.
Okay? And then this piece of line here was removed to facilitate after the blow-in exercise, then this line was removed. After the blow-in exercise, then this gooseneck was removed. Everybody understands that? Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Yes, I understand it. But I'd like to start it from the beginning, please, and watch it uninterrupted.
Yeah, that's the only stoppage I will have, Chairman, on this.
Thank you.
This picture shows an overview of berth 6 offshore, where the incident occurred. Depth in this area is approximately 60 feet, with riser pipes coming up from the sea bed. Here we see the actual configuration of the top side of the 30-inch diameter sea line number 36, into which the golfers were engulfed. We see the top bolted flange of the riser mating with a long radius elbow through which the product is pumped. The flange at the top of the riser is approximately 5 feet above sea water. This long radius elbow was removed to facilitate maintenance work on the said sea line. Here we see an overview of the model used to demonstrate the various work activities associated with the repairs and preparation of the line to facilitate such repairs. We see berth number 5 on the right-hand side, berth number 6 on the left-hand side. A distance of approximately 1,200 feet between them. The subsea line filled with fuel oil is seen, terminating with risers at berth 6 and berth 5. We also see the model habitat with a compressor on a floating barge. A 50-gallon tank container is also seen, filled with water to simulate the actual ocean, and a riser at number 6 berth, into which the divers were engulfed. We see also a manometer on the side of the tank used to measure the pressure inside the habitat when installed. This tabletop model represents part of the ocean with depths varying from 50 feet to 60 feet at berth 6. Here we see the offshore tank into which product from the sea line 36 was pumped to facilitate clearing of the said line. This manometer represents the pressure gauge used for monitoring the pressure within the habitat where the divers would execute their work. We also see a 5-inch diameter plastic bottle with a PVC pipe at the top to represent the habitat and stovepipe through which tools and materials can be fed and suspended. We also see an aquarium pump used to represent the compressor for supplying air to the habitat. The 1,200-foot long line filled with fuel can be seen with the levels at berth 5 and berth 6. So what we have here is a huge manometer between berth 5 and berth 6. This product in the line, as shown with the pointer, has to be removed to facilitate repairs. The 1,200 long line is actually straight, but is shown looped here for clarity. We also see the compressor hooked up at the top of berth 5 to facilitate the air required for pushing the product out. A line was pulled between berth 5 and berth 6 to show the levels in the risers. We also see an aquarium pump at the top there on berth 5 to supply the air to facilitate the air blowing as per PARIA's work instruction. This line diagram shows the piping configuration from berth 5 to berth 6 to facilitate air blowing using a compressor at berth 5 to displace the subsea line contents to the offshore tank 111 as shown in the line diagram, drawing 1. Compressed air was used from the compressor at berth 5 to displace the fuel oil from the line. We see the fuel oil being pushed forward along the line, subsea line, into the riser at berth 6, through the gooseneck, and onto through line 66 onto the offshore tankage. A point will be reached where more air than fuel was seen coming from the control valves at berth 6 and onshore, where flow was monitored and measured.
Right. Thank you for that. Can I ask just a couple of things from that, please?
Sure.
Before we move on. So we can see the red fluid. You don't need to hold the microphone when you're sitting down. You've got one in front of you. That's fine. Thank you. The red fluid is in a clear tube, isn't it? That represents the pipe.
That's correct.
So we can see the fluid by looking at the red fluid. The first thing I want to ask you is this.
The red fluid represents the fuel oil in the line.
Yes. So once the pump is turned on, it's pushing the fluid.
Once the compressor?
Yes.
Yes.
Is pushing the fluid along the line and out the other end. What we can see is that the fluid itself, it's not as though all of the fluid is being pushed in one motion. What happens is the air gets into the pipe so that there is some fluid in the pipe and some air above it. So that it's only, and you say the point is reached when there's more air coming out of the other end than there is fluid. And I suspect that that's when the pipe is more than half and half.
That's correct. You can, yeah, that's a fair assumption.
Right. So that you're left then, aren't you, with a pipe. If you'd stopped at that point in time and sealed off either end, you would have some fluid, say 50% of halfway up the pipe.
Yes.
And the rest of it would be some sort of air or gaseous air.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. but I'd like to go on the board here and demonstrate why that happened.
All right. Well,
Is it okay?
no, it isn't. Indeed, it's okay.
This is the
yes.
education exercise here for everyone.
Well, I'm ready to be educated, so go ahead.
And,
Yes.
and the entire country. That is the
Right,
objective.
you
as I
better,
said.
if you'd be good enough to put your little stick down and pick your microphone up, you will all be able to hear what you have to say.
Now, yes, I'll do a cross section.
Bit closer, bit closer.
I'll do a cross section of the pipe, right? And one has to assume this is the pipe here. Pressure is being applied here, okay? But what is happening here? The pressure is being applied at the start on berth 5, and as a result, the air is pushing here, but here has more friction as a little piece on top. And the air pressure here will push the top of the liquid first down the line. And that is why you see an air gap right down the line. And that will happen in a line that is level. Once the line is sloped, these systems become a little more aggressive and more fluid will be involved here because of the sloped condition. I'm going to show you that now, because that drawing suggests that the line is level. But in reality, the line was sloped at 0.2 of a degree. 0.2 of a degree. That is very small.
Just pause a minute.
I did not go into details with that in my report because I did not have the information at that time.
Just so that I understand, the line is sloped at 0.2 of a degree.
0.2 of a degree.
Right. In which direction? Where is it higher and where is it lower?
It was higher at berth 5. I'm going to draw that here to show the effect of a slope line.
I'm interested in this because the last time I stood up at the front of this board, that's what I was asking about.
Yes.
So higher at berth 5
Yes,
than at 6.
at 6.
So if berth 5 is over here
Yes.
and berth 6 is over here, the line is sloping down to 6.
The line is sloping down to 6.
Right. Not much, but it's sloping
Not much,
down.
yeah.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it is sloped a difference of 4 feet because of the profile of the seabed in accordance with the engineering design drawing.
Right. So at one end, that is the berth 6 end, it is 4 feet lower than it is at the berth 5 end.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Just a moment, I want to make a note of that. At berth. So if you put a pebble in, a marble in an empty pipe at berth 5, it would roll down to berth 6.
So we're down to berth 6. That's correct.
Yeah, I got you. All right, thank you. 4 feet difference.
Let me see if I get this thing right. Berth 6. Berth 6, the depth is more in the sea level, right?
Is
At berth 6, the depth is more.
Deeper.
Deeper, yeah.
Yes.
Than berth
by 4 feet.
Right. So berth 5 is higher than berth 6.
Got it.
And they are pumping from berth 5.
Yes.
Good. And when you pump from berth 5, the pressure on the inside of the pipe in that direction towards berth 6 will result in a wider surface area being experienced on the cross-section of the pipe with respect to pressure. As a result, more fluid will be ejected per unit time. That's the physics and the hydraulics of the slope.
Right. That's all a little confusing, I'm sure, to lots of people.
But I just wanted to see who would understand that.
Yeah,
But what I'm trying to say here...
It's not a test.
Yes. What I'm trying to say here, if the line was sloped and the initial stages of blowing will result in a lot of more liquid flowing out from the line than if it was level.
Can I just need to understand that.
So, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think you're Mr. Chairman, you have a good engineering concept. You better than
Does that mean I passed your test? I just want to understand.
What he drew here was probably what I wanted to draw in the beginning. And when the pressure, if here, this riser will be emptied first. This riser here will be emptied first.
I get it.
You get it? Everybody understands that. This riser will be emptied first because you're pumping from this side.
Yeah.
And what happens when the level gets here, pressure will be exerted here all along in that empty space. So that pressure is over a larger area and it will push more liquid forward.
And it changes once you go past the elbow.
Once you change here, once you pass this first elbow,
Yeah.
the pressure on the surface of the liquid is larger. Well, the pressure is the same, but the surface area is more. So therefore, it's more liquid pushing this way.
Right.
That's the hydraulics of that kind of line. And if it will take me time to put up this model, but this model will demonstrate that in no uncertain manner.
All right. Well, we believe you. Can I, just so that I've now understood it, I think, that given the difference between the depths at the elevations on either end, it means that if you were to look inside, once you've done that in part, let's say you just pumped out a few barrels till it went down to the elbow, and you looked in the pipe at riser number 5, it would look as though it was clear. If you put a dipstick in, it would clear as if it went right down to the bottom. Whereas at riser 6, it would be 4 feet up above the ocean bed into the riser, wouldn't it?
That's correct. Because what happened, I'd assume that the top of this riser here had a flange.
Yep.
And the valve was here, whatever they were pumping. Let's assume that.
Yes.
The valve. And when this compressor is shut down, air will be locked inside here.
Yeah.
That's number 1. And that air, I wouldn't get to the stages yet, but it was shows in my subsequent video. And that pressurized air will suspend a volume of liquid high up on that side.
At the other end.
So who is ever monitoring on that side will say, hey, you ain't move out enough stuff yet, boy. You got to take off a lot more stuff because my level is high on this side.
Yeah.
And the level on this side is 0.
I got it. I absolutely understand it. Thank you. Perhaps we can move then to the next one. Thank you very much.
I think the next video clarifies that particular concept.
Okay, Mr. Khan, what we will do is that I'll play and stop at point 1 second and then ask them.
As phase 1A.
This is the document you would say that was attached to PARIA instructions work for the line clearing at page 1040 of volume 3 of the core bundle. Could you explain to us what the document shows us?
Well, this is 5 birds here.
Yes.
This is 6 birds, right?
Yes.
Microphone, you need the microphone.
Oh, sorry. My voice is good. I thought my voice could travel right through, but yeah. 5 birds and 6 birds. We are pumping from here,
Yes.
through here, and up, as everybody understands,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But when the monitoring took place on top here, and they realized that excess air was coming out, at that particular point, assume that it was decided that, hey, too much air is coming out here, we have not emptied this line properly. So to get at the point where this line is properly emptied, phase 2 was introduced. And phase 2 was introduced by taking out the gooseneck, taking out the elbow from here, and connecting a separate 6-inch line to feed the remnant stuff into C-line 66. Okay? And the only way to do that, you could not have blown there and get the same result. You have to blow from here and introduce a dip tube at the bottom here and pressurize the entire line. And that pressure will force the remnant liquid through the dip tube into this line to get the remnant liquid out. It's a pressurized system. And I have demonstrated that in one of the videos.
Right.
To do that, this has to be blanked, pressurized here, and this has to be blanked here. So both ends of the pipe will be blanked, but in that blind flange, there's a dip tube coming out inside it to reach the liquid. And when it pressurizes here, the liquid from here will be forced up that dip tube through here and come out. Suppose when you see the video, you might be able to understand that.
Sure.
Okay.
It follows that the dip tube is smaller than the circumference of the,
Yes,
the diameter of the pipe.
The pipe, yeah. The dip tube is smaller.
Do you know what size it is?
I think there was a 6-inch dip tube.
6-inch.
Yes.
Right. So a 6-inch pipe, something like this, is pushed right the
Right
way
down
inside,
to the elbow.
and a seal created between that 6-inch pipe and the top flange out of the 30-inch pipe that it's coming. A seal is created.
The system is pressurized internally.
Internally, right.
So the only opening is through the 6-inch pipe.
Gotcha.
There's another drawing here that was issued, which shows this setup here, but it was issued.
Okay.
And it's somewhere in the bundle, I don't know.
Okay, you can stay right here, Mr.
Yeah, okay, good.
We'll play it and stop at 16 seconds, please.
Blowing was not capable of displacing all the product in the line. Phase 2 air blowing using a 6-inch diameter dip hose at berth 6 was done. Drawings showing the line diagram with dip hose at berth 6.
Right, could you explain? Yeah.
Okay. This is the setup. This represents 636 C line, number 6 berth. You see the flange on up here? That is a blind flange. And the blind flange had a dip tube going on inside here, like this. See here? This represents the blind flange. The dip tube is going down right down to the bottom of the elbow. This is closed, and that is an inspection port where they would have used to measure the ullage. So, as I said before, at the end of phase 1, there was a pressure at number 5 berth locked in, and that supported a column of liquid inside here. And when whoever took a dip here would have said, hey, we still have material to move out, not realizing that that section of the line is almost empty. But the pressure inside here would have supported the column of liquid in here. So to get out of that now, he had to put this dip tube and drain out into the slops badge. And that is what I think I saw in the method statement.
Yes, and for the records, that document is attached to LMCS method statement for phase 2 line clearing at page 1043 of volume 3 of the core bundle.
Well,
can I ask you now to play the video and stop at 31 seconds?
and an expanded view of the modified blind flange at berth 6 to accommodate the dip hose and inspection port can be seen. A modified blind flange was used to accommodate. You could
reverse it there.
Reverse a bit.
Reverse.
Go back to me this way.
Good, yeah.
This here is the expanded view of this. In engineering drawing terminology, people do that to show that, hey, that is the expanded view of this. Okay? So this here is the expanded view of this. So you're showing a more detailed view of this setup here, which is this. So you see the dip tube coming here to the bottom,
Yeah.
and the inspection port is there. And this tube comes up here, and it continues here, and goes to shore.
Okay. You want to play now?
Everybody understand that?
Stop at 31 seconds.
Flange at berth 6 to accommodate the dip hose and inspection port can be seen. A modified blind flange was used to accommodate the 6-inch dip hose at berth 6.
Right. What we are seeing here, could you explain it here?
All right. At that particular point, as I said, the gooseneck on the top side of berth 6 was removed. And this is the flange that I was speaking of in the initial picture. This is the sea level here. So this flange was above sea level at the time. Remember, they have to do repairs below here. So they have to cut this line below this level here. And to get at that, they had to put the habitat on. But anyway, we'll come to that after. So you will see where the dip tube, I simulated the dip tube through a flange here, and I held down this thing with some paper clips, some bulldog clips, and
yes.
This was a dip tube going down to touch the remnant liquid in the pipe. And when this system was pressurized, both on that side, through the system, it forced the remnant liquid through here and come to here, and you will see that demonstrated.
Right, so if I understand it, this is a modified flange with the dip hose at berth 6. And could you point out to us the elbow at berth 6, which has now been removed?
Well, we don't have it here.
Oh, you don't have it here?
That's the one I showed you in the original picture.
Okay.
That's the 36-inch elbow.
And the dip hose has been inserted?
Yeah, when you take off the elbow, you expose this flange.
Okay.
And they would then put on the modified flange on that with this dip tube inside here. And another valve here with an inspection port.
And
they will pressurize the entire system from number 5 berth.
And this was all part of phase 2 of the line clearing?
Yes, to ensure that at least you get off as much liquid as possible.
Could you play the video and stop at 1.58, please?
6. A blue plastic hose is shown in the model to represent the hose inserted into the berth 6 riser to the bottom of the elbow to facilitate removal of the remaining fuel oil. The sealed 30-inch seal line, being blind flange at berth 6 and at berth 5, was pressurized at berth 5. The pressure within the 30-inch diameter subsea line then forced the remnant fuel into the 6-inch dip hose to storage as seen. This continued until air with little fuel oil was seen emanating at the collection area, at which time the dip hose was removed. The air supply at berth 5 was subsequently closed and the system stabilized. The remnant fuel oil was pushed up to a certain height in berth 6, balanced by the locked-in back pressure at berth 5, giving a false impression of the subsea level line being filled with oil still, and not realizing that the line was practically empty with a large gaseous void. The line level was pulled between berth 6 and berth 5 to show this difference in levels between berth 6 and berth 5 as was reported.
Right, pausing there, just looking at that model that you've created, we can see that if that's the point at which it had stopped, the pumping had stopped, there was fluid in parts and there were air pockets in parts, just looking at it as we can see it there, because there remained this pressure at berth 5, at that end, yes. So that the realities were that we can see the model as it's been created by you. That is the way in which the pipe would have existed at the point in time when they took that plug out.
No, there's a little difference here. And what is happening? Let me just
Well, you
go
haven't
back.
got the habitat on yet.
No, we have not put the habitat on yet.
Right. Yes, of course.
Right?
Yes.
So when you applied compressed air there was a point where they say, close the valve on their method statement or shut down the compressor, one out of the two. And if you do that, you will still have a locked-in pressure on that line, on number 5 berth, and push the remnant liquid. By that time, the gravity would have caused the remnant liquid to remain here. And the pressure would push this remnant liquid up to a point here, somewhere here, right? And when they inspected this, when they removed the dip hose and they looked inside the pipe, they would have seen liquid to a certain level.
Giving them a false impression
False
of where
impression
the ullage
that
was.
the ullage, you have a lot of liquid inside there still.
And
they say, okay, we have our ullage. They get the ullage up till here. But lo and behold, this ullage was a false ullage.
Yeah. Leading
to belief that this line still had a lot of stuff in it.
Well, that was still flooded.
Flooded. Because nobody looked on that side to see what was happening.
Quite.
But eventually, to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, the blind flange on berth number 5 was taken out just before. But let me go back one. Let me get this clean here. When this was achieved, right? When this was achieved, they then introduced the inflatable plug and the mechanical seal on this side.
At this point in time.
At this point in time, when they saw the ullage to the point where they want to reach, they said 35-foot ullage from this place to this point, or 30 or 35 feet they were looking for.
Yeah.
They saw that. They say, okay, now it's time to introduce the both plugs.
I think it was about 17 feet of ullage they were looking for. So
all right.
35,
yes.
effectively, if you took both ends, if it were equal.
Equal, yeah.
If it were equal.
But they said, but I think LMCS statements say they were looking for, I think, 30 or 35 feet ullage.
35?
Or 30 or 35 feet, I think so.
No, you're right. It is 35.
Yeah.
70 altogether.
Yes,
That's right.
70.
Yes. Yeah.
So they saw that and they introduced and put their inflatable plugs in. And that created another problem.
Well, it locked the condition of the pipe.
It locked the condition of the pipe. But that was no problem at that particular time. The system had stabilized.
Yeah.
And the plug was installed here. Both plugs. Remember, the riser is still up here, above sea level. And they inserted that plug inside there with a long handle and make the seals. And then they had to come down and cut off this old piece on top here. That is when they introduced the habitat. But then let's not get there as yet. The important thing, they introduced both seals at this particular point, thinking that the ullage is required, the ullage that they wanted has been achieved, and thinking that this entire line here has liquid filled in it. And what happened? When this was installed here, right before the accident, they went to do the carb test on number berth 5. And when they opened that flange, the pressure was released there and pulled down the liquid a little further. And that created a vacuum on this side.
It did, yeah.
And that accelerated or made the system more dangerous.
Wow.
Because if you have a pressure on top the plug
All right, just pause
and a
it.
vacuum under the plug.
I need to make a note. Just
Still asking the question. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if we could watch your video, that video number 2 from start to finish.
Okay, but I just want to complete one more thing, Chairman, with your permission.
If I could just ask him before we do that, you could point out where the gaseous void is?
Yeah.
Gaseous void, but all the way along, all the way down, through the entire pipe. Because at that particular time, according to the records, almost 80% of the fuel oil in that line was removed. According to the report. So if you remove 80% of the contents of a line, 80% of the line is empty. And what I'm getting, so when they went there to do the carber test, they take off the flange. And the air pressure on that side was released. And it became atmospheric pressure on that side now. Instead of the locked-in pressure, the remnant locked-in pressure from the compressor. And when there is atmospheric, remember here it's plugged and sealed properly. And that will cause the weight of the fluid to come back down here a little bit and create a vacuum under the plug. And that was a double jeopardy. You have a pressure on top of the plug and a vacuum underneath.
So the release of the pressure would have made the event more aggressive.
More aggressive. And at that point, one could accurately assume that if the plug was not holding, the additional vacuum under the plug would have dislodged the plug. But the plug held its adhesion to the pipe. The inflatable plug, I mean.
Is that the inflatable plug?
That is the inflatable plug. And the inflatable, as we on that, could I go on that, Chairman?
Well, just a moment. Let Mr. Maharaj ask you the questions to help us.
Well, unless anything more on this, I can then play the whole video for this.
Yes, I'd like to see the whole of this video uninterrupted again, if I may, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you could play back the video on the second video.
As phase 1 air blowing was not capable of displacing all the product in the line, phase 2 air blowing using a 6-inch diameter dip hose at berth 6 was done. Drawings showing the line diagram with dip hose at berth 6 and an expanded view of the modified blind flange at berth 6 to accommodate the dip hose and inspection port can be seen. A modified blind flange was used to accommodate a 6-inch dip hose at berth 6. A blue plastic hose is shown in the model to represent the hose inserted into the berth 6 riser to the bottom of the elbow to facilitate removal of the remaining fuel oil. The sealed 30-inch sea line being blind flange at berth 6 and at berth 5 was pressurized at berth 5. The pressure within the 30-inch diameter subsea line then forced the remnant fuel into the 6-inch dip hose to storage as seen. This continued until air with little fuel oil was seen emanating at the collection area, at which time the dip hose was removed. The air supply at berth 5 was subsequently closed and the system stabilized. The remnant fuel oil was pushed up to a certain height in berth 6, balanced by the locked-in back pressure at berth 5, giving a false impression of the subsea level line being filled with oil still, and not realizing that the line was practically empty with a large gaseous void. A line level was pulled between berth 6 and berth 5 to show this difference in levels between berth 6 and the berth 5 as was reported.
Right, thank you. There's one question I want to ask you, please, about that. So, the purpose for putting a dip hose in at berth 6 was to remove as much of the line content as possible.
That's correct.
That's
the only way you could have removed it.
Certainly, I get that. So if all you actually wanted to achieve was a 35-foot ullage, if that's what you actually wanted to achieve, firstly, would you have been able to measure the volume necessary to achieve a 35-foot ullage at either end? Assume you have a full line of fuel, right? You open this end, number 6, you open this end, number 5, you want 35 feet at that end, and you might have something different at that end if it's not level, but I mean, the levels will be the same, right? Down from the surface. 35 feet down that side, 35 feet down that side. It is, of course, must be capable of measuring how many barrels of oil that represents.
Of course.
The equation is not a difficult one. I think
It's a difficult one.
but elementary mathematics for anyone to work out how many barrels would need to be removed in order to achieve a 35-foot ullage at either side. My best calculation suggests something in the order of between 40 and
And 60 barrels.
I was
40
gonna say,
and 60.
between 40 and 60 barrels thereabouts.
Yeah.
Per barrel being, I think in the US is 42 gallons. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So that's the sort of volume that needed to be removed in order to achieve that ullage, whilst maintaining the fluid in the rest of the pipe. That is, as I say, straightforward. Once you start blowing and pushing and putting in pipes, this dip hose and so on, there's only one intention, and that's to clear the line completely.
That's correct. Can I say something, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking for a moment. So whoever was doing this, LMCS or PARIA, seeking to drain this line completely on the face of it, it must have been intentional, because putting a dip hose in, there's no other purpose for doing that. I mean, frankly, you could stick a bucket down each side and start pulling the barrels out that way, well, couldn't you? To get to your 35 feet of ullage.
This technique, phase 1 and phase 2,
Yes.
clearly states that the line was going to be emptied. There's no question about that.
Right. Thank you. I think that's a useful point, if I may say so, at which to take our break for the lunch. All right. Can I ask for a shorter lunch? Would 45 minutes be enough for everyone? Thank you. Yes, 10 past 2 then, please. 10 past 2. Thank you.
All right.